Keys to the Shop, episode 397, Diversity and the Color of Coffee with Keith Hawkins. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I am your host for the show. Always happy to have you along. If you're just joining us on Keys to the Shop for the first time, man, have we got some episodes for you. There's a lot. If you go to keystotheshop.com, that's a great way to kind of peruse the episodes. You can search for topics in the upper right-hand search bar. Also, subscribe to the show. You can search the episodes from within your app. You subscribe to Keys to the Shop. You find the topics that you want to hear about. There's over 700 different air dates or episodes that we've put out over the course of 6 years. There's a lot to choose from. So I would highly recommend you subscribe to the show. You'll always be updated with new content if you do that. And also, if you love this show, would you give us a 5-star rating and review over on Apple Podcasts? That makes a big difference, as well as sharing these episodes or just giving people the information that's on these conversations and just letting them know Keys to the Shop is out there as a resource goes a long way. It's how the word has spread thus far. And to those of you who have already done that, I thank you. Now, on top of busying myself doing this podcast, I'm also busy myself doing consulting. Consulting and coaching through Keys to the Shop Consulting means working one-on-one with coffee shop owners and operators to help them build a wonderful and thriving coffee shop with happy baristas, happy customers, and ultimately a happy you, to find joy in the process of ownership. And in the midst of challenges of scale or refinement and profitability, or just starting a coffee shop off on the right foot with great foundations, Keys to the Shop Consulting is here to help you find clarity, forward momentum, and to get the right kind of tools to help you navigate the ebb and flow of coffee shop operation and ownership. So I would love to have a conversation with you and see what working together might look like. Give me an email, chris@keystotheshop.com. That's CHRIS@keystotheshop.com. We'll set up a free discovery call, talk all about what's going on and how Keys to the Shop Consulting can help you. Again, the email for Keys to the Shop Consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. One of the most exciting things about coffee is the coffee. Is the coffee that we drink is so exciting because there's a story behind it. Each flavor is a taste of the place. The terroir of the coffee tells a story. And so we want to make sure that we're representing it well. With the best equipment, we can do that. And one of the best ways to go about brewing your coffee in your shop is with the Ground Control Cyclops brewer from Voga Coffee. So over at groundcontrol.coffee, when you go to that website, you're going to see this machine in action, all the places that use it, just the incredible visual this machine is, but inside is where the magic happens. The SCA award-winning technology gives you unprecedented control over a range of flavors previously that you couldn't access with traditional batch brewing technology. But it's not just an amazing batch brewer. It makes tea, batch iced lattes, batch cold brew, so many different extraction possibilities, create profitability and efficiency in your workflow. It's a winner. Again, go to groundcontrol.coffee to learn more if you're looking for high quality, next level quality, in fact, efficiency, more avenues of profitability, and just being on that next level of quality to represent the story of coffee well, then I recommend getting a Ground Control Cyclops brewer in your store. Check them out, groundcontrol.coffee. Baristas around the world have spoken, and one of the things that they've said is that we love the Barista Series from Pacific. The Barista Series was created for baristas and tested by baristas before it even reaches your shelf. This is a company The Barista series and Pacific specifically has been a supporter of barista culture in the coffee industry for a very long time. It's not just about transactions with them, it's about making sure this product speaks to the greater purpose behind what we do to offer something truly special. So no matter what you choose from their extensive lineup, you'll know that it stands up to the heat from steaming, produces amazing texture for latte art. It also keeps the balance of the beverage focused on that lovely coffee of yours, so your guests get this total experience. Your baristas will love serving your guests this product. So for all of your plant-based beverage needs, I do recommend going to pacificfoodservice.com and get samples. Try it for yourself in your store and see what I mean. If you're looking for the best plant-based beverages to serve your customers, I do believe it has to be the Barista series from Pacific. Okay, everybody. Well, today I'm really excited to share with you a great conversation about a topic that is definitely relevant today. And it's always been relevant, but it's part of what we should be focusing on in terms of hospitality. And that is the topic of diversity and the idea of how we are opening up our spaces and our businesses and truly giving opportunities the way that we can, and being curious about those things and figuring out, what does the landscape look like right now, and how can we create a better landscape in the future? And to have that conversation, we're talking with somebody who is making an incredible difference for a good many people to experience a new reality of opportunity and diversity. We're talking with the founder of the Color of Coffee Collective, Keith Hawkins. Now, Keith Hawkins has been in the coffee industry for over 25 years. He's a passionate coffee connoisseur, and his pragmatic approach to the coffee industry is to introduce and inspire the consumer, curator, and the curious coffee people to explore an awe-inspiring journey of coffee that is certainly compelling, and to engage in conversations and change along the way. Keith is the founder of the Color of Coffee Collective and Coffee with Keith. That's coffee with a K. The Color of Coffee Collective is comprised of diverse and talented minority coffee growers, farmers, producers, roasters, baristas, artists, and coffee enthusiasts. The mission of the Color of Coffee Collective is to educate people about the specialty coffee industry from a diverse perspective through symposiums, workshops, conferences, and open and honest conversations. And that is exactly what you're in for today, as Keith and I talk about his journey in the coffee industry and the experiences that he's had along the way navigating the professional landscape of the coffee industry, but finding a gap in opportunity and diversity that has inspired him to take action himself through his example, through rallying the community, through this organization, through resourcing and inspiring the next generation to usher in a more diverse landscape in specialty coffee all across the value chain. So this is really a dynamic conversation. Keith brings a lot of wisdom and passion to it. Really admire what he's doing with the Color of Coffee Collective. And so I really hope that you enjoy this. Without anything else from me, let's get right to it. And welcome to the show today, the founder of the Color of Coffee Collective, Keith Hawkins. All right, Keith, welcome to Keys to the Shop. Great to have you on the show. How's it going today?
Awesome, Chris. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on. Admired your work from afar. I listened to you for a long time, so it seems kind of surreal to be here. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I really appreciate you being here. And you're kind of busy right now. You're gearing up for a symposium or this big event, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
This is our second annual symposium. Last year was our first, and we had a really good turnout. This year, we feel the momentum is picking up in terms of response and people who will be here, and super excited about that. Symposium is simply just, I call it, or some people have named it, kind of a family reunion of sorts, where people who we admire in coffee, but just happen to be people of color, will come and learn and educate and get to network with other people in coffee. Don't get a chance to go to Coffee Fest or even an SCA or NCA, and just try to network and learn more from each other and have a great time.
Awesome. That's always powerful. That's the thing I love most about gathering in these kinds of settings. And this is under the umbrella of the Color of Coffee Collective, which, how long has that been a collective and when was that founded?
Man, great question. So I founded the organization in 2021. And initially, the call was not to do a symposium, but really what our foundation was for is after many conversations, people of color in coffee, and hearing some of the disparities that they were experiencing, and more so kind of how we could just try to collectively help those folks out by networking with folks within the industry, but then also just plugging them in the right places. It became so painfully clear that we needed to do something that allowed for those folks to be in spaces that made them feel like, hey, your voice matters, you are heard, and you're seen. But in addition to that, it also gave them a space where they got to share their shared experiences within coffee that, initially, because I've been in coffee now for 25 years, but when you're first in, there's this idea, man, I'm struggling all alone and I'm on this island all by myself. So this symposium last year gave people an opportunity to see, yeah, the same struggles you're feeling, we're all feeling. It's just a matter of how do we bridge those gaps, work together, communicate, and try to figure out ways in which we can move forward within this industry that we all love and make it a better industry.
Beautiful. Obviously, you said you've been in the coffee business for 25 years, so quarter of a century. That feels unreal to say. That's pretty awesome.
Chris, it makes me very old, man. I'm just saying.
Today, or not today, but this year is like 23 years for me. So I feel like I'm chomping at the bit to say 25. I don't know. But I'll tell you, obviously, there's a lot of experience you have over the course of over 2 decades, both good and bad. And then these disparities are not just things you're hearing about. These are things you've experienced throughout your career that is, part of what this was born to address. And so I wondered if you could kind of give us an overview of, you entered into the coffee space and you've had these experiences. Tell us a little bit about how your career's developed and how these things became pretty apparent to you.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I started out in coffee on the office coffee side of things. And so, office coffee service for the listening audience is that part of coffee where especially 25 years ago, it wasn't specialty. It was mainly where you go in and you deliver coffee to offices who had a coffee service where, they had a company that would bring them equipment and sell them coffee. And so within the spaces of offices, you know, people would have their desired cup of coffee every morning and offices would provide that for them. And so I got into the industry just simply by an introduction from a friend of mine I was in the military and I was a drill sergeant and military police. And I just had enough of just kind of the whole kind of structured environment and just wanted to come home and try something different. And lo and behold, my friend said, hey man, come try coffee. And of course it was a paycheck for me. And I had a lot of fun meeting new people and talking to people, but it wasn't anything that I took seriously for the first 5 to 8 years. It really wasn't. It was just, I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed the people that I worked with. I enjoyed the company. But it was probably about 8 years in that I realized that this could become something that I was more, I could become good at and just kind of figure out another way to climb the corporate ladder. And so in doing so, I also discovered that in climbing the corporate ladder, that there were a lot of opportunities, and especially because of my leadership background and because I was in the military, that were being presented to me, but only from a perspective of kind of not necessarily a front facing leadership perspective, but just leadership in roles of like support. And then finally, I got an opportunity to take a leadership role where I actually managed people and became a front facing manager and had to go on managers retreats with the organization that I was with. And it was there that I discovered in those managers retreats that we did annually just to kind of highlight the managers and talk about the company's accomplishments, that I walked into a room and it was nothing but white men who literally were the faces. They were the front faces of our company. And initially, I walked in with the idea, oh, that's cool. I'm one of, or I'm the only one that's in the room. And what I realized real quickly was probably a couple of years later, it was that was a clear sign of a system that I grew up in that had me to believe that anytime you walk into a room and you feel like you're one of, or you kind of arrive because you are, that's clearly a sign of just a system of oppression. And unfortunately, there was a lot of that taking place. And so, fast forward to say, I realized that while being in coffee at that point, 10 years, I enjoyed every moment of it. I also realized that there were some opportunities that I needed to discover. And unfortunately, when it came down to the professional development part of that, I also discovered that there really wasn't a whole lot of avenues to take for someone to say, hey, we want to take you to another level. Here's some things you can know. We want to take you on an origin trip. Like those things weren't happening for me. And so I had to make a decision because I knew that I loved coffee. I loved the pay that I was making. So I had to make a decision for myself. And that decision was is either leave the company or move to a different space. So I left the company and went to go work for Starbucks. And that really opened my eyes to a whole bunch of stuff as well. And that's kind of where my professional development started because, contrary to what people say, I really enjoyed my time at Starbucks. It was a great opportunity for me for sure.
Wow. Okay. So the idea that I mean, you're trying to pursue professional development, and people obviously see that you're passionate, you're long term, you've got this front facing management and leadership position, but you had to take it into your own hands in order to make something happen where there was a lot of opportunities sort of happening for other people, just not yourself, right?
Correct.
That's obviously going to either be motivational or it's going to be frustrating and make you just want to quit. Obviously, you didn't quit, so you took it into your own hands. I mean, what's behind that? Because you could get disenfranchised with the whole thing and they say, screw this, but you didn't and you kept pressing forward. And when did things begin to kind of turn for you where you realized, like, not only am I, going to pursue my own professional development, but now I'm going to be, also helping others in this now that I've seen what's going on?
It probably, well, let me go back to, so the professional development point that you just raised about, it was frustrating, it was irritating, it was demoralizing.
Mm-hmm.
It was all of those things, right? And here's the reason why. Because if there was ever a blueprint for, hey, we want someone to lead our company in these areas, and this is not to toot my own horn, but I just did a whole 10 years in the Army as a drill sergeant and a military police leader of people, right?
Right.
And so it would seem quite natural that the transition would be sure, we want to have you lead us or at least be a part of the leadership team. But it dawned on me that while all of the credentials I carried were certainly impressive, they were not enough to overcome the clear and obvious answer in the room, and that is, could an African American, even with my credentials, be convincing enough, or more importantly, persuasive enough for our audience to believe that our company cares enough about providing the right leadership to lead this company in the right direction? Those things really did hurt. But the reason why I stayed is because, as you mentioned, I'm a very motivated individual. I'm very determined because, but it's not for selfish reasons. I'm determined because I really believe that the legacy that we leave on this earth is predicated on not from selfish ambition, but it's really about an inclusive ambition, meaning if we are ever going to see change and not just talk about change, we have to begin to navigate our own personal worlds, do an introspective look, and go, how can I personally change the way that I move so that everyone around me starts to move a little different and our world becomes better. It's not shouting from the rooftop, it's not throwing scripture out at people, it's not arguments and debates publicly, but it's about action. And so for me, I knew that if I was ever going to be as impactful as I had guaranteed, or I made this promise to my grandparents because I grew up as a sharecropper's grandkid, but I guaranteed them that I was going to work hard and I was going to leave an impact, the same kind of impact they left on me. So that's how I stayed.
Man, that's awesome. And naturally, you just taking on a leadership position that is not bestowed upon you, bestow it upon yourself to do that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
And so when you started to take those steps to do that, now you're at Starbucks, right? And as you develop there, how did you start to see the example that you set in your actions for the collective? How did you start to see fruit come from that?
I saw fruit come from those steps as a result of I had so with Starbucks, I was a store manager. I ran a few of their stores because first of all, someone saw in me the potential. They actually read my resume and they believed that I could do the job, and they allowed me to do the job. They gave me the freedom, the keys to do the job, no pun intended, but they gave me the keys to the shop. And they said, listen, we want you to actually go do this thing because we believe in you. And so the fruits of that came from the people who I developed under me that begin to see within themselves who didn't ever see that. And they were all young kids who had just began to get into this coffee world, either as a barista or a shift manager, because I gave them the same tools that were given to me. And that is, listen, I'm going to continue to lead you and give you all the corrective actions that need to happen, but I'll also give you the freedoms to make a great impact on our customers every day. And that's what we did. And as a result, those kids moved on to, either they stayed in coffee or they left coffee and moved on to something different. But I like to believe that each one of those left again, feeling an impact that, hey, I made a difference in this small time or this small window that I was here at Starbucks, and it worked out well for them.
And you didn't have to do that. You could have just, done what maybe the lowest common denominator of manager that had the keys to the shop would have done. But this was something that you were doing for the purpose of legacy and for their legacy too, because you know how much it impacted you to have somebody give you that opportunity and a fair shake at it too, that people would look at your resume and not just at outward appearances, which a lot of us don't feel like we have that in us, but it's just a fact that the reason why you go into a coffee shop and everyone tends to kind of be similar is because we're motivated by comfort. We say we like progress, but we're not really motivated by progress. We're motivated by comfort. And if you want to just, say, hey, it's fair, let's just give fair and equal opportunity, that requires a little introspection too, doesn't it?
Absolutely, 100%. And you're right. We're motivated by comfort. Oftentimes when we talk about the collective and we talk about kind of, where do we see ourselves? And I love to share like with people, like we started this in 2021, and I'm not sure how long it'll take, but I hope that our literal end goal is that we're able to work ourselves out of a job so that we're no longer needed, and that diversity and equity is just a natural language. And I believe it's possible. I really do. From the bottom of my heart, I believe it's possible. I just think that, again, we have to begin, as you mentioned, with that introspective look for each and every one of us.
Well, like you started in the beginning of our conversation talking about the dynamic relationships that happen and the encouragement that happens in the midst of fellowship around a common goal, maybe common struggles as well. Yeah, I imagine that is just the flywheel gaining momentum over time that produces all sorts of solutions that one organization couldn't just conjure up under their brand, which is an awesome goal. I mean, I'm curious. I want to dig into that a little bit and say, like, 10, 20 years from now, let's say you are out of a job and that is exactly what happens. What does that look like in the coffee industry, with shops and roasteries and other coffee businesses?
For me, it looks like there's not a whole conversation around diversity and equity and inclusion because it's a natural movement. It's a natural progression. It's like what you mentioned earlier, right? So we're comfortable we feel more secure and comfort. We love to be around people and things that look like us and talk like us and do the same things as us. And I think that that day eventually will come, but it begins with dispelling and erasing the ideas of, or more importantly, the fears of not knowing people. Right. I think the problem is that most of what we're experiencing now when it comes to the inequities of the industry is there's just this lack of knowledge. And when I really mean, and when I say also that we're worked out of a job, I don't just mean, here in the continental United States or over in Europe. I mean, also in the places of origin, right, where farmers are being paid fairly and where the direct trade, they're getting a fair market value for the products that they're producing. I think all of these things matter, and I think it begins to really set in when, everyone looks at the coffee supply chain as a touch point for every single person and not just fighting for one aspect of coffee. Because to be honest, I had a meeting the other day and I asked coffee consumers, I said, how many of you in here drink coffee? And large 90% of the people raised their hand. And I said, and if I were to say to you that your average cup of coffee that you're buying every day at your local coffee shop would someday go up to 5.50 a cup, would you still love coffee? And all of them were like, oh my gosh, I couldn't afford that. And I go, man, well, what if I told you that that would be bring a fair day's wage to a farmer and his family? Would that make sense for you? And I think it was a lack of that understanding or a lack of knowledge for people that they really didn't understand kind of how that whole transaction worked. So for me, I think working ourselves out of a job will look like everyone sees the industry as equal, and they see it as normative to walk into a shop and pay 5.50 and to also tip your baristas, but know also that you're supporting a shop that also supports farmers that are doing the right thing and that they're paying them a fair wage.
It takes going beyond, like we were talking about comfort, but also when we're talking about the familiar. You mentioned we all like to hang out with people who, look, act, and think like us. It's just kind of this natural bent that we have as humans, I think. But we've been hiring people in coffee shops for a long time. And I'll tell you, as as a consultant, one of the major things that people talk about is just how hard it is to hire the right people. Now, let's just assume that if we're hiring out of familiarity on a surface level, that's giving us the immediate comfort, but that's kind of a junk food way to choose people, you know?
Yes.
It hasn't been working that well if we look at the turnover rate. So even in the idea that we have to question the initial instinct we have to go with what's, you know, on the surface really familiar, and that's going to get us out of this jam of hiring, it forces us to look at that deeper common thing that unites us as a diverse group of people.
Yeah, man, without question. I having a conversation with some folks who are coffee shop owners, and one said to me, hey, look, we're having some turnover and we're having to go do, we've got to go hire some more baristas. And I go, can I ask you to rethink that for a minute? And he looked at me strange. And I said, and he said, what do you mean? And I go, well, what I mean is I think where you have to begin is it has to begin in finding great customer service reps, and then you train them to be baristas. So the problem you're running into is you keep hiring baristas who just keep doing the turnover, and that's causing you your problems because either one, they want more pay, or they feel like they deserve this and they've been in the game a long time. And no disrespect to baristas, because I certainly want them to be paid, but I also think that you have to look at a fair and equitable balance in terms of like, just don't keep walking into a shop or keep bringing people in because they have barista on their resume. Find somebody who is interested in making sure your customers are well taken care of and creating wonderful experiences for them. And you'll find somebody who will stay with you because you're going to train them, you're going to pour into them. And even if you have baristas that you bring them on with the concept of, man, I want to pour into you the same way people poured into me. And if no one poured into you, then I would ask that you go get that leadership, but continue to learn and grow, because that is what's going to change the environment of this continual turnover, and more importantly, again, create this diverse community of coffee representatives that we're looking for.
Okay, so you start the Color of Coffee Collective, and this is, born again from your experience and from your own network and the stories that you hear. What's the response like? How did it first get received in the industry?
So from the people who I spoke with, man, people were fired up because this is something that, we've talked about, but the representation part of it is like who does the work and when does it happen and who's going to take on that responsibility. And so to see it actually come to fruition, like I said, there was this awesome sense of, man, this is family reunion all over again. This is a place that we love and we breed familiarity with people who we followed on Instagram or seen on social media. And then all of a sudden now we see them in person. We hear their stories and this is really, really cool. So that was the one great thing about it. It was really exciting for that from that perspective. But the real work for me was not, and is still not, to be at these annual events, these symposiums. While I love them and it's a lot of work to put on, the real work for me is literally us going into coffee shops in different cities and or the work that we do in training young minority students, introducing them to coffee so that we can begin to prepare a generation of diverse individuals to learn more about coffee and to get into the coffee industry. So that's the real work for me. The symposium stuff is, while it's fantastic and I love the feedback, it's not the bread and butter of our organization, because where we really want to challenge the specialty coffee industry and making sustainable change is really getting into a spot where we see diverse people throughout the industry. And when I don't have to walk into a room and it's all white men or young white women now, and a few women at that, but we're able to walk into a room and there's diversity and it's intentional.
Right. Okay. So you're building this deep bench of professionals by training the next generation. And I feel like there's this author, Cal Newport, did the book Deep Work, and he has this early book called So Good They Can't Ignore You.
Mm.
And that phrase came to mind. Just, it may not be contextually parallel to what was the book was about, but in the sense that if you are like yourself, you're so good, this resume of yours, they gave you this opportunity. Your resume spoke for itself.
Yeah.
Right. And in light of the fact that there might not be as many opportunities out there, there are opportunities that, if you are so developed and know where to go and know how to work and know about these things or have these skills, it's more likely that you're going to be in those spaces and you're going to take up that space and do an amazing job. So that idea of so good they can't ignore you, it seems like you're really putting that into practice by investing into that next generation.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. I've got to check that out. It's exactly where we are. So I can no longer continue to, as I tell the youth that we work with, I can't look back at your life at 16 or 17 years old and go 5 years ago, this person did this to you, right? While all of that's a part of the system that you were brought into, but we have to begin to then ask the question of how do we get beyond the system that has created for you these, what seems to be an insurmountable amount of hills to climb and overcome, and then where do we want to be in that, right? Because we can talk about it all day, but at the end of the day, what's going to create some practices that allow you to remain successful? And success is certainly relevant and is not, it's not an all inclusive, or it's not a all of this or nothing. It's literally, for me, for young people, I see this all the time, we talk about it. Sometimes success for them is just graduating high school. Sometimes success is just getting a job that allows them to help their parents pay bills, and which is a great part, a huge part of what we do to ensure that they have those opportunities. In addition to success, I never want people to feel as though, being seen or on a stage is the be all end all for what you do. Because again, my whole principle in life is to always ensure that wherever you are and whatever you do, ensure that you're making an impact so that people that are coming from behind you will go, wow, I felt that because of this individual. And that's the whole goal.
That's good. I want to point out that your work and your character and the spirit that you bring to stages that you might end up on later is going to be more impactful as, you've kind of, I don't want to say earned, but you've been in the coffee business 25 years.
Yeah.
And the Color of Coffee Collective, not saying it wouldn't have been successful had you not gone through that much experience in coffee, but that is an integral part of it, means that, you're on this podcast, you're on a platform, but that wasn't the means through which you sought to affect change. It is kind of a byproduct of it.
Yeah, 100% agree. I didn't wait to say, man, let me first do the work after I get on Keys to the Shop, right? Because, and then reverse of that, nor was I saying, let me do this work so that I can, have this platform. Because at the end of the day, for me, Chris, and my team will tell you, I'd rather not be seen. It drives me crazy to have my face out in front of anything. Because for me, it's about the people we're impacting. And I don't want to ever feel like we are or I am superseding them or their stories. Right, because the stories that I can tell you walking into coffee shops and specifically minority coffee shops across this country that I've had the pleasure of walking into and talking with, it is mind blowing to me to know that some people are still just trying to remain sustainable in a space in which they've dreamed and desired to open up a business, but little or if any information came with them opening up their business, and but a lot of people took an opportunity to take advantage of them with equipment or with the lack of education. So there's a lot of different spaces, man. But yeah, I am very thankful that I get an opportunity to share my experiences in coffee, both with adults and specifically with youth, to help them prepare for life, whether they choose coffee or not.
Awesome. Let me ask you about, everyone listening to this show has some degree of involvement in coffee shops and roasteries, either owners or managers and people in leadership who just want to do better in coffee and want, especially, I think, people first solutions and systems and things that they can do to serve well. What kind of things would you recommend for this group of people listening that has the ability to put policies in place and enforce things? And what kind of steps should we take to create a better future?
This begins with you taking an introspective look at, do you really want to make an impact on the world and leave a legacy behind? And what I mean by that, it is not so much a wealthy legacy, but a legacy that says, our company has done the work, right? Or even my family has done the work, or our team has done the work. Whatever that culture is that you are leading, I would ask that you first look at yourself, because oftentimes I think what ends up happening is we begin to scream at people and organizations without even realizing that the organization has existed the way that they've existed because they've become familiar with who they've become familiar with. And it's not intentional that they have ignored communities or people and or cultures that they've existed for so long, and they've ran with blindfolders on. And I listen, I don't think that that's the case for a lot of organizations, but I do think that that's the case for some. So if there is that opportunity, I would say take a close hard look at your organization, your group, and just say, look, have we done the work, and are we as diverse and are we as inclusive as possible? And don't be afraid to take chances. And this is from, when I say take chances, I really mean, look, it took Starbucks to really recognize my resume of leadership after 10 years of being out of the military, right? And the same things that we scream about in this country about, listen, we want soldiers and leaders and dedicated people and, and committed to the cause and all of these wonderful phrases that we throw behind our companies. But at the same time, you can be as degreed and as professional as possible and yet still not get those opportunities. So you got to ask yourself, what are we doing different in our organization to create, or more importantly, to show that we're genuinely interested in leaving a legacy that shows that we've made an impact?
I want to get deeper on that because you said take a risk, but Starbucks didn't really take a risk with you professionally because, I mean, you were like slam dunk, right?
Mhm.
It was more of a risk geared toward the familiar where you're not asking people to say, okay, well, choose them because of their skin color or choose them because they're going to fill this position and make you look a certain way because that's tokenism.
Exactly.
And this is something way beyond that. And it's way more sustainable, but it again requires people to sort of take that introspective look and say, how can we do that work and honor this idea through giving opportunities and even just curious a little bit about it. It seems like you would find some ways and opportunities to switch some things up, and it may make a big difference. And people underestimate how powerful their organizations actually are, even if it's just a coffee shop or coffee shops.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I use that word take a risk, and I appreciate you pointing that out, when I use that word take a risk, I use it from the standpoint of oftentimes people are afraid to move in a certain direction because of their fear of the unknown, or they have been trained to believe that, oh, this subset group of people cannot do or perform in this manner, so therefore I will not choose. Right. And I think that's a small or a minute mindset of people, but nonetheless, it's out there and it's prevalent and it's a part of, again, the system that it was created. But I do think that taking that risk allows you to say, look, again, it goes back to my initial point. If you're literally wanting to make an impact on this world and this culture and your communities, and most of the times you go to a website of any organization and they have all of these pillars of, their involvement in, the world and communities, but yet, oftentimes the fingerprint for that, it can't be traced, right? And so, or the footprint for that can't be traced. And so you have to really reevaluate who you are as a company, who you are as an individual, and just say to yourself, man, look, either I do or I don't. But if I don't want to do that, then I have no room to complain about the way our system is set up, or more importantly, the way the world reacts around my uninvolvement in the future of this world.
Well said. I think my last question here is similar, but it's to a different group of people. It's the people that are a part of the collective, the Color of Coffee collective. It's the people who you're hoping to inspire to grow professionally, who are maybe trainers or they're baristas and they're hoping to get management positions, or they have a new management position that is just kind of freaking them out or something. Like there's all sorts of places you might find yourself, but to those people, what is your advice to continue down this path in a meaningful way that not only makes an impact on their life, but also kind of takes up the same mantle as you, which is to pass it on to the next generation?
First thing I would say is you're needed, you're valued, and more importantly, you matter in this industry. And because you matter and because you're valued and because you're needed, it's crucial that you take on the responsibility of ensuring that the people who follow in your footsteps, whether it's 6 months from now, 6 years from now, whatever that looks like, that you leave a path that says that person poured into me and they made an impact on my life. Therefore, it is crucial for me to follow in those footsteps. But please, 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 always do a better job of whatever you are to ensure that the environment that you're in, the shops that you're in, the communities that you serve is better because you were there. Don't leave the community or the environment that you're in worse shape because you are being selfish. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are words that are thrown out today as some type of hate words, or filled with some type of fear. But in reality, it's really getting to know your neighbor, loving on them more, and being just a better neighbor. And if that scares you, then I'm sorry, but that's That's the makeup of who we are. We were created for community. Regardless of who you serve and your religious beliefs, I'm convinced as a believer of Christ that we were created for community. And community requires all of us to give of ourselves and to offer grace to others, man, and just love on people, man.
Amen. I love that. And it's offering that grace to others. And there's a patience involved too. And we've mentioned this on the show as well, that there's a necessary grace to give yourself if you're going to give it to other people as well.
Mm, yeah, yeah, love that.
Well, Keith, this is fantastic. I really appreciate you taking time to be on the show and sharing with us this inspirational organization and what you're doing and the difference you're making. Where can we go to learn more about the Color of Coffee Collective and especially this upcoming symposium?
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris, for having me again. I've admired you from afar. It feels as though, as I think it was on the Academy Awards, one of the actors said, I'm standing here shaking in my boots trying to give this speech and I can't say all the people I want to thank. I feel like that. But man, listen, I really, really, really appreciate you. I appreciate the work that you're doing, that you have been doing, and the people you've had on your show. I'm telling you, I listen a lot, all the time, literally. But for those who are listening and want to know how you can support or help or find out more about the Color of Coffee Collective, of course, it's colorofcoffeecollective.com, colorofcoffeecollective.com. And if you want to support our nonprofit entities in which we are really blessing shops as well as teaching young people about coffee and helping minority students and young adults get into this industry and then just plug their way through. You can always find us at coffeewithkeith.org as well as on and that's Coffee with Keith with a K. You can also find more information about us on our website where we have link trees, especially on all of our social media. If you go to our social media, you'll find the link trees. And if you want to donate, then please understand all of your donations or go to our nonprofit organizations will be accounted for. And certainly you'll see the work that we're doing. Just follow us on social media and more importantly, listen to the stories of people whose lives that we try to make an impact on.
Wonderful. Keith, again, it was great to have you on the show. And yeah, we'll have to do this again sometime.
Yes, please. Anytime, sir. Anytime. And to your audience, love coffee in all its colors. God bless you.
Okay, everyone. Well, like I said, this is an honest conversation about a topic that might not really be much of a conversation in a lot of our businesses. The idea of having a conversation means you go deeper than just platitudes and you get curious and you try to find ways through your own example, through your own power as an individual, or if you have a company, through that means also to create these opportunities similar to the way that Keith is doing through this organization and through these symposiums. I really love what Keith was talking about when he kind of equated this to loving your neighbor. And we need fellowship. And I truly believe, as a Christian myself, that we are created to gather and be together and fellowship. And there's so many solutions and great things that can come from that. I think we all understand this. When we get together as people and we love each other well and we love our neighbors and we truly lean into sometimes the things that might be uncomfortable, that's part of it. And hospitality is not all about a well-regulated event that's more of a pageant. It often is somewhat uncomfortable, but as a result of that discomfort, there is a bonding and there is progress. And progress is definitely what we're after here. So great to have Keith on the show. I really appreciate his work. Again, you can find out more information about the Color of Coffee Collective by going to colorofcoffeecollective.com. Follow them on Instagram also. That's just at Color of Coffee Collective. One of the great ways you can support this organization, is through donation, but also it would be great to just kind of boost the posts and the information about the symposium coming up and just the existence of this organization for those in the industry who need it. So again, check them out over at colorofcoffeecollective.com. And so thank you, Keith, for all you do and for being our guest here at Keys to the Shop. Now, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback about today's episode, always feel free to email me, Chris at keystotheshop.com. That's also where you can reach me if you're interested in having a conversation about working with Keys to the Shop Consulting. If you want one-on-one coaching for you and your business, go ahead and reach out, Chris at keystotheshop.com. Now, one of the places I see Keith and the Color of Coffee Collective over the past year, at least, has been at Coffee Fest. And that is just one example of the types of organizations and people that you can meet that will literally change your life. The information, the relationships, again, coming together as a community, as we were just talking about, the fellowship with other like-minded professionals. This is something you definitely have to be a part of. Coffeefest.com is where you can learn more about this organization that's been in operation for 30 years. It's a trade show, but it's more than a trade show. It's a resource. It's a hub for education on a wide range of topics with free and accessibly priced trainings, workshops, lectures, panel discussions, and events like the Coffee Fest Latte Art World Championship Open, cold brew competition. And like I said, it's a trade show, so you get to interact with vendors and businesses whose booths are there for you to ask questions, sample products, etc. So this is a great place. So go to coffeefest.com to see the upcoming shows happening this year: New York, Louisville, Kentucky, Anaheim, California, and then in Orlando, Florida. You can use the code KEYS, K-E-Y-S, to get 50% off your registration for you and your team over at coffeefest.com. Again, that's KEYS, K-E-Y-S, to get 50% off your registration. I'm going to be presenting in New York in a week, just about a week from now. 5 different talks. I'll be judging latte art. And then I will be at all the shows this year. So I hope to see you there. Especially I'll be here for Coffee Fest Louisville, because that's like my hometown. So it is going to be really awesome. So again, if you want to be inspired, equipped, and energized, coffeefest.com. And with that, that is the end of our episode today. Thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time to listen to this conversation with Keith Hawkins of the Color of Coffee Collective. This was a great conversation, and I hope that you stay tuned for more great conversations on the show. Have an awesome day, and as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.